This route is about 1.3 miles compared to the Queen's route, which was 5 miles back in 1953. And when we take those shots, you'll see that this is an extraordinary display of the military might of Great Britain today. Nearly 4,000 armed forces personnel will be marching in this procession. 1,200 members of the British Armed Forces lining the route as well. An incredible display of military power as King Charles makes his way back to Buckingham Palace in just a moment from now in the Gold State Coach. Wilfred Frost, as I turn to you, reflecting on the service, they really tried to have a hand in tradition, but also to give a nod to the modern monarchy and the modern Britain that it is a part of.
And right there at the end of the service, where we had contributions from non-Christian faith leaders, perhaps the best example of the attempt to modernize things. By law, the monarch is defender of the faith, meaning the Anglican Christian Church, the Church of England. But King Charles has been very clear he wants to be defender of the faiths, plural. And this was a very clever way to try and show that step forward. But as you say, reflecting on the service, I just say thank you to William the Conqueror for being the first to have his coronation at Westminster Abbey, because I don't think you could have a more special place. And in that 2 hours, so action-packed, it flew by. We got all the grandeur and splendour of Westminster Abbey in full.
And of course, the King himself is a deeply religious man. We know that he says his prayers every night. Prince Harry wrote that in his memoir. He's a man of deep faith, but he's also a man who's studied the Quran. He's very interested in Islam. He had a nod towards his father's Greek heritage by having a Greek prayer. So he's interested in his own faith, but all other faiths as well, which, as Wilfred was saying, was very much reflected in the service.
Let's go to Molly Hunter, our correspondent, who's along this procession route. And the faithful have had to really test their mettle this morning with the driving rain at times, but now the payoff, and I dare say it's brightened a bit. What are you seeing along the procession route, Molly?
Savannah, seriously driving rain, but everyone out here really stuck by their big screen set up. And I have to actually comment on just kind of the unbelievable musical experience out here. Driving rain, really great speakers, and it was really kind of a 3D experience. People were really, really moved, and we could see it on their faces even during the rain. And I actually looked up during that service, looking back at 1953 and now kind of about how Westminster Abbey has been outfitted for this massive production. Back in 1953, 29 microphones, Savannah, were set up according to the BBC. Today, 192. So no wonder the music was so extraordinary. Now, we were really looking to people during the Pledge of Allegiance to see if people actually joined. As you mentioned, these are the faithful. If people were going to join into that, certainly it would be these people. We didn't hear that much, but we did hear very boisterous, very loud "God Save the King" and a lot of applause after that was sung. One more really interesting tidbit about 1953, Savannah. Apparently, it was also a very cold and rainy coronation day for Queen Elizabeth II. And apparently, in that Gold State Coach, which you guys have already discussed, very uncomfortable, apparently a hot water bottle was strapped underneath her seat. But we have no confirmation if King Charles will get the same luxury today.
Well, they have tried to make some improvements to the Gold State Coach, but it is a notoriously bumpy and uncomfortable ride for the royal rear end, shall we say. And we saw that some of the other carriages are now joining in this procession. We'll have Prince William, Princess Kate, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis all in one carriage, followed by the Wessexes, the King's brother and his family, Prince Richard, Bridget, Vice Admiral Tim Lawrence, and the Duke of Kent and Princess Alexandra will all follow in carriages. And the Princess Royale, she's of course, the King's sister, is the Colonel of the Blues and Royals. And so she will be, in the official title, Daisy, for you on this one, the Gold Stick in Waiting.
Gold Stick in Waiting. And on horseback. So in a way, she is there to lead the military procession and to protect her brother. It is obviously a purely ceremonial role, but it is a huge privilege. And she has spoken about it in the last few days, saying that she takes this as it was intended to be, as a sign from her brother how much he values her, and how he has always said that she looks after him and protects him, and he wanted that to be shown on this day in a formal processional manner. I think that's very touching. And of course, she was wearing this extraordinary pluming hat, behind which you could hardly see Prince Harry.
And Simon Lewis, when you look back at some of the old footage, especially the young Charles, it's always Charles and Anne, the eldest of the children. They were always together, and here they are again, still apparently close, and him giving, as Daisy mentioned, a real role of honor to her in this procession. I'll turn now to Tim Bouvier, who's our British historian, and we were just discussing some of the family ties here, and the Princess Royal and King Charles having spent so much time together, the eldest children before the little ones came along, and all that old footage. You can see that a real bond was born there, and he has given her a real role of honor, has he not?
He certainly has. He only has one sister, and she's immensely popular. She's famously the most hard-working royal, racking up more royal visits and duties during the course of the year than any other. And he's also invested her prior to this ceremony with the role of deputizing for him when he is out of the country, which is something important. She made a remark in a recent interview that the monarchy cannot be slimmed down too much more than it currently is, because when the then Prince of Wales made those statements about wanting to slim down the monarchy, he had two working royals as sons, and the fact that that is now no longer the case has meant that people like the Princess Royal and the now Duke of Edinburgh have to take on even more royal duties.
And we're watching just outside Westminster Abbey. We see Prince Harry along with his cousins and their spouses. Keir Simmons has got that vantage point right now. We also saw Prince Andrew there. Obviously, Harry was required to wear a morning suit, not the military uniform he might have preferred, given that he is no longer a working royal. We did see Andrew earlier here in some kind of ornamental garment. Unclear what it was exactly, but it's underscores that there's those who are in the inside, the working royals, and those who are on the periphery now, Harry among them, even though he is the king's youngest son.
Well, that's right, Savannah. And there you have also, of course, the Duke of Sussex, Prince Harry, wearing his medals, even though he, of course, isn't in military uniform, because he is not a working royal. But what I think is really interesting is watching him join the other royals in the vehicles behind the procession as the Gold State coach makes its way towards you, as this extraordinary procession heads towards you. So is Prince Harry. So we assume then that he is heading to Buckingham Palace. So the big question, I think, is going to be, how long will he stay in London for? There have been those reports that he would head back to California. It is, of course, his son's birthday today. But will he stay? And ultimately, and we've got nothing to say that he will, and perhaps it still seems pretty unlikely, but is there a chance, is there a possibility that he may appear on the Buckingham Palace balcony behind you there with the King and Queen and the Prince and Princess of Wales and their children? Wouldn't that be extraordinary?
Well, I think many people would be heartened to see such a moment, and that moment will unfold however it will unfold in a few moments from now. Right now, though, the 1.5-mile procession from Westminster Abbey, site of the coronation service, back to Buckingham Palace at a horse's pace in the Gold State coach. 4 tons carried by 8 horses, and affording a glimpse of many along the way of their newly coronated king and queen. Molly Hunter right there among the crowds, hoping to catch that glimpse. Molly, what are you seeing?
Savannah, it is starting. So actually, momentarily, they will turn the corner to you and you will start to see the very beginning of the procession, but they are making their way back, as you say, at a horse's pace, at a walking pace. And people are absolutely in awe. People are kind of completely entranced by the unbelievable precision that we are witnessing right now. Coming up where I am right now, and I think you can see part of it in my camera possibly, are troops from the Commonwealth. And you see them in unbelievable precision here. 20 different bands, Savannah, and you've got to believe they're slightly separated out by troops to make sure the sounds don't completely compete. We're seeing the first of 20 right now, and they are making their way by, and you see about 1,000 people actually lining this route from the armed forces, the standard bearers of the Royal British Legion, uniformed civilian services, and youth organizations who are standing at attention. And they are going by right now. We are talking thousands of airmen, of seamen, of soldiers walking by right now. It is a sight to behold, and there are a lot of flags waving, in tune with the band going by me right now. It is extremely jubilant out here, Savannah. We're just around the corner. I'm sure the noise will travel to you momentarily.
I think we're catching at the beginning of this procession. There's the gold state coach as it makes its way down the mount toward Buckingham Palace. When you see the flags, you see all the flags, not just the Union flag, but the flags of the Commonwealth and the realms represented here today. 4,000 members of the military, part of this procession, the largest military ceremonial operation in 70 years since the Queen's coronation 70 years ago. Starting to hear the national anthem play now. And talk about precision. We were told by a source that this military procession has to literally squeeze through the gates of Buckingham Palace, and so a 12-file line has to become a 6-file line because there will be a salute inside the gates of Buckingham Palace in just a few moments, Wilfred.
Which was a key decision that was made by everyone organising it, because otherwise the many thousands of troops at the front of the procession, many of whom have come far and wide from places like Canada and Australia, would have just ended, disappeared, and never even caught sight of the king. So they wanted them to all convene and gather out the back of Buckingham Palace so that they could then be saluted and salute the king. And that aspect, as you said, the timing's so key, will mean they suddenly have to speed up and file down as they go through the gates of the palace.
And every time that they go round a corner or through a narrower gap, they have to do this concertina movement where they change the pace at which they're marching just by a nanosecond so that they can come together and then fan out without causing log jams, like traffic jams. You see, when you see on a motorway when the speeds go up and down, and that causes a tailback. And exactly the same thing happens in these military processions. So they are amending their gait, the length of their steps, with every step to make sure they stay in line. So there's so much you can't see with the naked eye that's going on.
Well, and they can't see it because there's 4,000 of them. They are roughly 1.3 miles long on a route that's only 1.4 miles long. I mean, remarkable to keep all of this sort of thing in time.
And we're starting to see them file in behind us, and they'll do that magic trick of squeezing in the gates of Buckingham Palace. As we await the Gold State Coach's arrival here at Buckingham Palace, there have been stands set up and people have been able to listen to the ceremony. Lots of spontaneous applause at key moments, especially when the king was crowned. At that very moment, President Biden issued a tweet congratulating King Charles and Queen Camilla on their coronation. And so this day is unfolding here in a rainy London, but we're hoping that perhaps the skies will part for the military flyover that is planned for later this afternoon. As I turn to Tim Bouverie, who is our British historian, you look at a day like this, you reflect on it, and it really speaks to all the facets of the king's reign as ceremonial head of state, head of the armed forces and head of the church.
Yes, certainly. We've had the ecclesiastical and religious part. This is now the pomp and pageantry, and this was a ceremony, this procession back to the palace, which was really brought into its own in the reign of Edward VII. This was about projecting the power of what was a very, and still is, small island, and yet was ruling over a vast swathe of the world. That no longer happens, of course, but the pageantry remains the same, and you can see all of the flags of the Commonwealth being marched up the Mall towards the palace along with the sovereign's escort. So this is about a projection of British power which could, even in the pre-digital, pre-television age, somehow export beyond the British Isles.
Well, I want to bring Simon Lewis, former communications director for the Queen, into this conversation. I'm imagining a great number of sighs of relief over at Westminster Abbey right now at a service that went off without a hitch. I saw an interview with the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, who said he had been practicing with the crown, a replica crown, because it fell to him to place the crown upon Charles's head. He said, I've been crowning anything that would stand still long enough with that replica crown, wanting to make sure that nothing went wrong in the moment. I assume the palace will be very happy with how the service unfolded today.
Yeah, it was beautifully executed. I was talking to people in and around the palace early in the week, and they were quietly confident. That's probably the best you can get from palace officials in terms of optimism. The great thing about the monarchy and the royal family is they manage expectations. And all these great events, in my experience, are always better than people expect, because there's never a sense of trying to oversell things. And this was just absolutely superb, obviously meticulously planned, but the fact is that these are the events that really matter on the world stage as well. I mean, even for me, that wonderful moment, Prince William, the Prince of Wales, paying homage to his father, the King. I mean, these are incredibly powerful symbols as well as moments of magic. So I suspect the staff in the palace they'll be feeling pretty pleased about how this went, I have to say.
And the band is growing louder as more members of the military file past us. And there's the shot, the Gold State coach, the showstopper of British coaches.
It looks so golden, it's almost fake. I mean, I can assure you that it's not. It's 7 layers of gold leaf over wood that had been regilded, initially built in 1762, commissioned by George III. And at the time, that gold shine, the splendor of it was very important to him. In fact, it was comfortably the tallest coach at 3.6 meters tall when it was built. And of course, back then, those things were critical to showcasing your majesty and your status without, of course, all of the modern promotional tools we have today. But, I mean, it is also looking a little bit rickety, as we discussed earlier, relative to the coach on arrival.
Well, the reason it's uncomfortable is the suspension is on straps of leather. So it's a very ancient way of suspending it. And the reason it's so tall was so that the monarch could be seen by the people. So you could look up and see the monarch over the heads of the soldiers or over the heads of the crowds.
In fairness, the suspension was the best that 1831 had to offer at the time.
Fair enough.
William IV, it was state-of-the-art then. Now, of course, it's a bumpy ride for the royals, but a historic one. And if we see that, I believe that's the Diamond State Jubilee coach that the Waleses are in, which is a more modern ride built for the Diamond State Jubilee.
A more modern ride, and you can see that the 3 children there. And of course, they did quite a clever trick with Louis during that service, which some viewers won't have noticed. He appeared to have been there throughout the whole of the service, but he wasn't. He snuck off for a bit in the middle, which I think was very wise, so he could come back and be on form.
Well, I thought you were going to tell me she slipped him an iPad, which is what many parents would have done in a similar circumstance.
Or sweets.
If they could have something like that. Let's go to Molly Hunter along the parade route, because I think Molly's about to get the glimpse that her part of the crowd has been waiting for.
We're about to, Savannah. Look, I think I'm underestimating or overestimating, rather, how quickly the Gold State coach is moving. It has already come through the arch at the top of the Mall, and I am looking up at it. It is probably still I would say probably about a minute away, and everyone necks craned, iPhones up in the air, umbrellas down so everyone can see in the back. People are waving their flags and waiting for that moment. There is only one moment that everyone here came out to see, and I have to say, Savannah, as a quick preview, King Charles will be on the side of the street that we are on their way out. Queen Camilla was on my side. We got to wave to her. We were basically eye to eye with her when they were, of course, in the Diamond Jubilee coach, which is about 10 feet up. And I'm just looking down to see how close, Savannah. We're still probably, we'll wave in front of the camera. We're still probably about 30, 45 seconds away until he is directly in front of us.
We'll keep an eye on it, Molly. I want to bring Katie Nickel, Vanity Fair royal correspondent, into this conversation. I was looking at those images of William and of Prince George, thinking about then Prince Charles at 4 years old being at his mother's coronation. And you have to wonder, Katie, what goes through the minds of a Prince William or even a 9-year-old Prince George who knows that one day this is their destiny as well.
Absolutely, Savannah. You said the very word. It's destiny and it's succession, isn't it? We've seen the pomp, the pageantry. That's what we're experiencing now. We've seen the ancient ritual. But I think when you look at William, who presented his father with the royal stole, George, brilliant, master of the page, looking after the king. For both those men, that realisation, particularly for the Prince of Wales, I'm going to be next. This is about succession, and what we're going to see in a few moments' time, I think, is that projection of the future of the House of Windsor, because I think most people would agree that because of his age alone, Charles is going to be a transitional king. The real future of the House of Windsor lies in the Wales family. There's no mistaking, and there was no coincidence that they were part of that procession into the Abbey. It was deliberate. It was all about the projection of the future.
And we saw those moments where it was William who took an oath as liege man for life. It was William who knelt at his father at a striking moment, and you see that tradition, that trajectory, the thread that the monarchy is meant to represent.
And you do have to just pause and admire the way that this royal family has endured through time. When the Queen was crowned 70 years ago, there were still 100 monarchies. Today, there's only 25, but only one of them is still relevant. Through time, monarchies have either been thrown out or become pretty much irrelevant. This one still has relevance, no power, but relevance, and is the only royal family that still has a coronation ritual or service. And again, we're witnessing all of that today. With time, they've always moved ahead of the curve, so they've never faced that final moment of being toppled, as it were. And that is now Charles's duty, not to move with the times, but ahead of the curve, so that they don't ever face a sort of rip the Band-Aid off moment with the British people.
As I turn to our British historian, Tim Bouverie, I wonder if you felt that at the moment of the Queen's passing, she was such an institution, 70-year reign, if there were thoughts or concerns that the monarchy would be weakened just by virtue of her passing.
I think it was and is a very hard act to follow. And yet, the fact that the Queen was able to reign for so long has, in many ways, been an advantage to the present king, who went through some periods of unpopularity following the collapse of his marriage and then the death of his first wife, Diana, Princess of Wales. Had the Queen died in the late 1990s and the king acceded then, I think the monarchy would have been in a much more rickety state than it is now. And so I think his mother's longevity has helped him. And also the king is, in many ways, ahead of his time, as we've spoken about some of the issues he particularly cares about, such as the environment. I think that element of social and environmental campaigning that he has dedicated so much of his time as Prince of Wales to makes the monarchy relevant and revitalises it. But he'll have to continue to do that. I think it was some of the major constitutional experts in the 19th century who said that monarchy is all about mystery, and when you take away the mystery, you take away its power. Well, in the digital age of Snapchat and TikTok and every person you're meeting videoing you, you cannot have much mystery. It's a difficult thing. We saw that with the pen earlier following the accession of his mother. Every moment is captured in a way that it isn't or wasn't for the late Queen. but I'm fairly certain that the King will be able to rise to the challenge, and his popularity has increased markedly over the last decade.
Well, if you're just tuning in this morning in the U.S., we are watching the newly coronated King and Queen process from Westminster Abbey, site of their coronation, back to Buckingham Palace in the historic Gold State coach, the third oldest coach in the British collection. And they are being followed by some of the other members, senior members of the royal family. A procession that's leading to Buckingham Palace, where there will be a salute by the troops, 4,000 troops walking on the streets of London. Bands as well, an absolute feat of precision and fortitude in this weather at certain moments, and people along the streets have lined up hoping to catch a glimpse of King Charles and Queen Camilla. And it is slow going because it is a horse-drawn carriage, weighs several tons, takes 8 horses to carry it. But even at that point, it's still going just a very slow pace indeed, but gives the crowds a good chance to have a good look at their king.
And just picking up on Wilfred's point a few moments ago about the relevance of the monarchy and how today is such, they're trying to tread such a fine line of being relevant and historical.
Let's go to Molly Hunter, who's been waiting for this moment along the parade route, and here it is, Molly. Nice view.
King Charles is right there. I know, not bad. A couple of feet. I will let my cameraman zoom in. The Gold State coach just went by mere feet away, and you can hear the deafening cheers around me. That was pretty exciting. I think I just made eye contact with King Charles. He was about our level.
Well, congratulations. You are close enough to make eye contact, and I think that's, again, the Queen, one of her favorite lines. The Queen has to be seen to be believed, and so this coach affords a good view for those who are assembled here.
And, of course, the weather has been disappointing, but it is brightening up here. And we heard Prince William saying yesterday, when he did the walkabout, exactly where Molly is right now, saying that they were all praying for fine weather. Well, their prayers weren't answered, but it is astonishing how many people have still come out to brave the wet weather.
Which is great for the people, obviously, that for this part it's not quite pouring down as much as it has been. But even more importantly to come, once the procession has finished, they will open up the Mall, and this area behind us where the procession is taking place will then fill with people ready for the balcony wave. And again, that part we really hope the weather holds for all of those people, but also for their majesties, for His Majesty and the Royal Highness the Queen, because we hope they come out and spend a decent amount of time on the balcony and get to see the appreciation of the people.
And the balcony is a bit of a mystery. So much has been choreographed right down to the second. But as I turn to you, Katie Nichols, that iconic balcony shot out front of here in Buckingham Palace, we still don't know who is expected to be a part of it, whether it's just the King and Queen, whether it's just the senior working royals. Some have hoped that perhaps there'd be a glimpse of Harry and a sign, a grace note, a thaw in the relations there. And right behind us, if you take our camera, you can see King Charles's coach.
I mean, the palace have played this very close to their chest.
Katie, forgive us. We were momentarily mesmerized by the gold of the Gold State coach, but carry on.
Of course you were.
Could you blame us?
It's a wonderful moment. I don't blame you at all. No, what I was saying was that the palace have played their cards close to their chest as far as the balcony appearance is concerned. I think for me that's going to be one of the most telling moments of the day. If you think back to 2012, to the Diamond Jubilee, which, by the way, was also a total washout, Charles really used that moment to project that image of the future of the monarchy. It was just him, Camilla, William, Kate and Harry, and of course the Queen. Don't forget, the then Duke of Edinburgh was in hospital because he'd stood out in that rain on the barge for too many hours and had gotten a terrible chill. What are we going to see today? Are we going to see the King project what he wants to be as that image of the future of the royal family? Will we see it as working members of the royal family? And the carriage behind William and Kate and the Wales children is, of course, the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh and their children, James and Louise. You've got the Gloucesters behind them, the Duke of Kent. These are all royals who carry out very important roles. They are what the late Queen used to refer to as my substitutes, and Charles has used them as his substitutes. And as Daisy was saying earlier, the comments that the Princess Royal made earlier on this week to the Canadian network about how wise it would be to slim down the monarchy when it's looking, frankly, pretty slim already, raises a big question as to how the monarchy is going to work in the future, how many engagements it's going to carry out in the future, or whether it's going to have to completely remodel itself.
Well, we're watching as the gold state coach makes its way inside the palace gates, followed in this procession by senior members of the royal family. And they'll have a moment to pause inside before a salute, and then we'll have that balcony wave all unfolding in the next 90 minutes or so here in London. Incredible to be witnessing history. Daisy, just taking a step back, what does something like this mean to the British people?
I think the interest in the coronation will have surprised people. There is significant interest, but of course, as many people have been saying over the last few weeks, there's a demographic and a generational split here. The older you are, the more likely you are to be a great fan of the royal family, and that's the big challenge that they do have. As Wilfred was saying earlier, they have to be relevant, but they have to reach parts of Britain that they haven't managed to reach in the past. And I think part of that will be using Kate and William and the children, as we can see them there, to the best of their ability, which is why Charles and Camilla are very keen to share the stage with Kate and with William.
Well, they could just take more close-ups of Prince Louis, George and Charlotte, and people will fall in love. Next generation of the royals.
I was just going to say, one of the challenges, of course, for boosting interest in this event has been that we've had two massive royal events already in the last year, with the Platinum Jubilee and then, of course, Queen Elizabeth's funeral. But I think that was a purposeful decision. If the king had waited longer, a year and a half like is normal, or 2 years, it would have been seen as making it more about him, trying to steal the limelight when it was focused on him. I think there's been a purposeful decision to almost piggyback over the popularity of the Queen and get this done quickly. And his view is don't screw it up, as opposed to try and celebrate himself.
And we hear spontaneous applause again from the crowd as the procession moves inside the palace gates. So it gives us a moment to pause and check in Washington with Kristen Welker, our chief White House correspondent. As I mentioned during the ceremony, at the moment of crowning, the White House was ready with a tweet congratulating King Charles and Queen Camilla.
That's right, Savannah. President Biden, among the millions of Americans watching this historic day unfold, tweeting congratulations to King Charles III and Queen Camilla on their coronation. The enduring friendship between the U.S. and the U.K. is a source of strength for both our peoples. I am proud the First Lady is representing the United States for this historic occasion. And as we have been saying, the president is answering questions about why he is not there. He's talked about the fact that he's here because he's dealing with some challenges here on the home front. But he has a relationship with King Charles, Savannah, that really goes back decades. He was at Queen Elizabeth's funeral. The two were together at a climate summit in 2021. And they, of course, met when he was vice president and going back to his days really as a senator. And they have this shared dedication for fighting climate change. So I think moving forward, we are anticipating that President Biden will be welcomed at a state visit there in the UK in the coming months. That will be front and center. Worth noting, Savannah, that King Charles has a long history when it comes to meeting U.S. presidents. He was just 10 years old when he met President Eisenhower. He was 20 years old when he visited the Nixon White House, and he later would quip that that was the time when they were trying to marry me off to Tricia Nixon. And of course, that did not happen. But more recently, of course, he has met with former Presidents Bush, Obama, Trump, and Biden, and again, putting his climate agenda front and center. Now, as king, he will likely take a step back from that climate agenda. Savannah, one interesting note here. First Lady Jill Biden becomes the first lady to attend a coronation, but a 23-year-old Jacqueline Bouvier was there 70 years ago for the coronation of Queen Elizabeth. She was a freelance reporter at the time, and she wrote in the Washington Times-Herald in 1953, Londoners seemed amazed at the hordes of Americans here for the colorful event. Not unlike, undoubtedly, what we are witnessing there unfold today, Savannah.
a very colorful historical fact. Daisy McAndrew, you've been telling me this for days now.
See?
And I think you're trying to tell me that perhaps we have a future First Lady somewhere among the media ranks here.
Well, exactly. Who could tell? And also, did you know that it wasn't just Richard Nixon who was trying to marry the king off to Tricia Nixon? There was also the occasion when George W. Bush and Prince Charles were met, and they joked about the Bush daughters, the Bush twins, marrying William and Harry. So there's been a lot of matchmaking going on across the pond over the years.
I know those Bush daughters very well. That would have been explosive. Let's just put it that way.
It would have been good for royal commentators.
I think it would have been great. You know, Prince Louis was so well behaved. Jenna Bush famously stuck her tongue out of the window at the press, so it would have been pretty exciting to have that happen. But alas, here we are. And if you're wondering where we are in the ceremony today, we've had the coronation service at Westminster Abbey. You're watching the last vestiges of this massive military procession of 4,000 members of the armed forces file into Buckingham Palace. And in a few moments from now, we will see them re-emerge on the West Terrace in the garden of the palace, where there will be a salute to King Charles. It should be quite a moment and an opportunity as well for these armed forces who come from far and wide to catch a glimpse of their king, Wilfred.
I was just going to follow up from what Kristen was saying, and we all understand the reasons why the president is not here, and indeed that there is no precedent for a president to be here, and how great it is that the First Lady's here. I will say, as someone who loves both countries, it's a bit of a shame. It would have been wonderful to see him here from head of state to head of state, inviting your fellow head of state to the most important day of King Charles's life. That it would have been nice to see. But
the president did say he was planning to make a visit in the coming days. So, Wilfred, there's something for everyone.
Yeah, of course. No, totally. I just think it would have been great.
And traditionally, the reason that those planning a coronation here in Britain wouldn't have invited any heads of state in the past was because they didn't want the king or the queen to be outranked by any foreign heads of state. It was a hierarchy thing traditionally, and of course now that's not the case. But that was the reason going back.
And of course, many hundreds of years ago, they'd often be adversaries with the leaders of those countries, including US, UK. But it's just interesting how those times change. I wonder, for some of the visiting European royals that were there, if there was an element of envy, because of course, as we just discussed, they don't really have much relevance anymore. They don't have coronations.
They don't get a coronation of their own. That's absolutely right. And it's really only the Vatican and the Japanese royal families who can trace their heritage back as far as the Brits go. And we do know amongst royal circles there is a bit of competition. Or they go, my family's older than yours. It's quite a good put down for some European.
My jewels are bigger than your jewels.
And talking
royals, they're just like us.
They are just as competitive. And actually, talking of jewels, another touching thing that's come out during the service is that the crown that the Queen Queen Camilla is wearing, which of course we were joking earlier, Savannah, it's the first time a Queen consort has had a hand-me-down crown rather than a brand new crown made for the occasion. But she has had two of Queen Elizabeth's jewels and brooches incorporated into that crown. So a very nice nod to her former mother-in-law.
Well, the palace was pointing out that it was a reused, recycled crown. On the other hand,
sustainable.
It's had quite a glow up since it's had a few diamonds from Queen Elizabeth's collection.
It's definitely had a glow up. I like that. And also, Camilla can't wear any of the Queen's earrings because the Queen had pierced ears and Camilla doesn't. So she's not able to take advantage of that unless they get changed.
What do you want to bet the King and Queen behind closed doors may have taken a moment with those crowns off, however, because as we've been talking about, they're very heavy.
But maybe a martini for the King. We know that's his favourite tipple. A glass of red for the Queen, that's hers.
Well deserved if that's what they go for. But as you say, a moment for them to pause and have a little family moment. We hope that we're about to have this salute with these
Now
troops.
We're seeing this is the garden off the West Terrace of the palace, and they're going to squeeze 4,000 troops.
And the back end of the procession is still just going past us, so we're waiting to see, as you can see, some of them coming in still. And then, of course, once that's finished behind us, the mall, which you can see there, will open and allow people to come closer for the balcony wave. So a few little bits going on now before we get the salute at the back of the palace and then the balcony wave.
And now, are either of you a meteorologist? Because the real question this afternoon is whether this military flyover of the Royal Air Force jets will be able to take place at the balcony.
I am not, but I do have a friend who is an air traffic controller.
That's a good
And
source.
he has just been texting me saying that he doesn't think it looks good. He says the cloud is very low at 800 feet, and he's not sure that that flypast can happen. But we do know, particularly at this time of year, the weather here can change in a nanosecond. So if the cloud lifts, if the weather changes, then that flypast will obviously happen.
It's either way a bit of a silver lining that we're not in the midst of rain for this key part where so much is outdoors and so many people get to be involved. And I do think that balcony wave and the people in front of him is important. I mean, there's plenty of polls, of course, to judge public opinion, but one is, on this very weekend, the number of people that come out in support versus those that come out to protest, and the tone of that. And when we last had a big gathering, of course, and the king became king, the focus was still on saying goodbye to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. With this coronation weekend brings a focus on how many people want the royal family to last and what they think of the job King Charles is doing.
And of course, as Molly was saying earlier, it might not be a balcony appearance, it might be multiple. The Queen did 6, and the last one she did was as late as midnight. Now, that's because they were calling and calling and calling for the new young Queen to come out onto the balcony. So perhaps we'll get more than one.
Well, there'll be people here waiting for that moment if it comes now. The bagpipes, which of course were a favorite of Queen Elizabeth's, as we await outside Buckingham Palace.
Hey, thanks for watching. Don't miss the Today Show every weekday at 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 Pacific on our streaming channel, Today All Day. To watch, head to today.com/allday or click the link right here.